Welcome to AI Unraveled, your daily strategic briefing. It is Thursday, March 12th, 2026. I'm your host, Etienne Newman. Today's special is sponsored by JamgaMind. For the ads-free version of this high-density technical rundown, click the link in our show notes. For years, we've tried to teach cars to drive by having them copy humans. That got us 99.9% of the way there. But the final 0.1%, the long tail of chaos, is proving to be the hardest engineering challenge in history. Today, we are unraveling the autonomy frontier. We're looking at how the industry is moving towards System 2 reasoning, why the Pentagon is worried about Chinese connected software, and how cars are starting to dream in latent space to stay safe. Let's get into the data. Before we dive into today's deep dive, a quick note for the brands listening. If you are trying to reach the architects of the AI revolution, not just the tourists, but the technical leaders actually building the stack, we are opening up limited partnership spots for Q1. See how we can simulate your product for the technical buyer at jamgamind.com/partners.
Imagine you're driving a 2-ton vehicle down a steep hill in San Francisco.
Oh boy.
Right. You know all the rules of the road. You know exactly what the speed limit is. You know who has the right of way. Your vision is practically perfect. But suddenly, a teenager intentionally jumps right in front of your car, stares you dead in the eye, and pulls out their phone to film a TikTok video.
Which is, unfortunately, a very real thing that happens now.
It is. And if you're a human, you might honk, you might yell, you might slowly inch forward just to force them out of the way. But what if you're an AI? Your perfect code didn't prepare you for, human teenagers seeking social media clout. Your software is hard-coded to prioritize collision avoidance at all costs.
At absolutely all costs, yeah.
So you just freeze. You sit there completely paralyzed while traffic backs up for miles behind you.
It's the ultimate collision between clean, predictable software engineering and the incredibly stubborn, chaotic reality of the physical world. And that specific chaos is exactly why the global self-driving industry has found itself entirely ripping up its own foundation to start over.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a really fascinating stack of sources and unpacking them for you. We've got a massive, comprehensive March 2026 strategic analysis report simply titled AV Edge Cases. And we are pairing that with some really illuminating insights from the This Week in Startups deep dive into autonomous scaling.
And the mission here is just crucial for anyone interested in the future of urban infrastructure. For the last 10 years, we kind of operated under the assumption that autonomous vehicles would reach perfection simply by driving more miles, just mimicking human drivers.
Right.
But that approach has hit a hard ceiling. We're moving from an era of reactive autonomy to deliberative autonomy.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are going to explore how AI is abandoning mere mimicry to actually learn universal physics, which is wild. We're going to look at how international geopolitics is literally fracturing the global data map. And maybe the wildest part, how cars are now being forced to legally defend their own split-second decisions in plain English.
Yeah, that part is mind-blowing. But to understand why this massive paradigm shift is happening right now, in early 2026, we first have to look at the barrier the industry hit. It's called the 99.9% wall.
Right, and we should give credit where it's due, honestly. Getting to 99.9% was an engineering marvel. The sources point out that the basic stuff was mostly solved by the mid-2020s.
Oh, absolutely.
Sensor noise, camera glitches, basic object classification. If you put an autonomous vehicle on a sunny highway and asked it to stay in its lane, you could do that flawlessly. Multimodal sensor fusion worked.
It worked wonderfully for structured environments. But that final 0.1%, what engineers call the long tail, turned out to be infinitely more complex than anyone anticipated. The long tail used to be about failing to recognize a weirdly shaped stop sign.
Yeah, the classic examples.
Right. But today, the long tail is entirely composed of active edge cases. This is multi-agent friction.
Which is a very clinical way of saying that human beings are actively, dynamically messing with the robots.
That is a big part of it, yeah. As fleets have scaled up in major hubs, these edge cases have actually adapted to local human behaviors. That San Francisco scenario you opened with? The report classifies that as social hacking.
This completely blew my mind when I read it. Pedestrians have essentially reverse-engineered the safety constraints of the vehicle's software.
Exactly.
They know the car cannot and will not hit them, so they intentionally trap the vehicles to protest or, just to get views online. And the older System 1 reactive architecture of these cars has zero social reasoning capabilities.
None at all. A reactive system cannot differentiate between a toddler who accidentally drops a toy in the crosswalk and a teenager staging a viral prank. The system only registers object in path, must stop, must not move until object is gone.
Which just results in a state of permanent gridlock, requiring a remote human operator to intervene.
Exactly. So that's the hurdle in California. But then you fly over to Beijing, and the edge cases look completely alien in comparison.
Oh yeah, the Beijing data was wild. Because the problem isn't teenagers standing still, it's unstructured, hyperkinetic density. The streets are swarming with these new 2026 micromobility devices. We're talking about wheel-leg delivery droids that can seamlessly transition from rolling down a sidewalk to literally climbing up a set of concrete stairs.
It's science fiction stuff.
Right, and you've got electric unicycles flying down the bike lane at 40 miles per hour.
And those specific devices completely shatter the traditional kinematic models that earlier AI relied on.
Let's break that down for the listener. What exactly makes a unicycle break a kinematic model? Like, why does the AI care?
Well, a kinematic model is essentially the math of how things are expected to move based on their current trajectory and physical constraints. So, if an AI sees a bicycle, the model calculates its speed, understands it has two wheels, and predicts where it will be in 2 seconds. It knows a bicycle can't instantly move sideways, right?
Right, momentum carries it forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a wheel-leg droid, it can roll forward at 10 miles an hour and then instantaneously vaults itself sideways into the roadway in a completely non-linear fashion.
Wow.
Yeah, the sheer variance of how these new agents move exceeds what you can capture in any static training data set.
It makes me think of a teenager who just got their learner's permit. They've meticulously memorized the driving manual. They know the speed limits. They know exactly who has the right of way at a four-way stop. But they completely lack physical intuition.
Yes.
The moment someone pulls a prank on a 40-mile-per-hour unicycle in front of them, the rulebook goes out the window and they just panic and slam on the brakes.
Yeah, that is a perfect analogy. Force-feeding an AI billions of miles of video data to memorize just gives you a very experienced learner's permit driver. If you want to solve the unicycle problem, you have to stop teaching the car to mimic driving. You have to teach it to fundamentally understand physical reality.
And here's where it gets really interesting. To move from mimicry to physical understanding, the industry is transitioning to System 2 deliberative reasoning. The sources refer to these as world models.
Right.
Jan LeCun's AMI Labs just raised over €1 billion to champion an architecture called JEPA, the Joint Embedding Predictive Architecture.
And JEPA represents a massive departure from how we've been treating predictive AI for the last few years.
I want to push back on this generative AI concept for a second, though. Because when you and I, or anyone listening, hears predictive AI, our brains immediately go to deepfake videos. We think of models that predict the next pixel to generate a hyper-realistic video of, like, a cat riding a skateboard.
Sure, that's the popular understanding.
So why is predicting pixels a dead end for an autonomous car? It seems like having a high-definition video of the future would be super helpful.
It sounds helpful until you consider the computational waste. Standard generative AI is obsessed with irrelevant visual noise.
How do you mean?
Well, if a generative model looks at a street scene, it burns massive amounts of computing power trying to predict the exact fluffy shape of a cloud passing overhead, or the specific rust pattern on a stop sign, or how the sunlight ripples across a puddle on the asphalt.
Right. The car doesn't care if the cloud looks like a bunny. It just needs to not hit the delivery truck in front of it.
Exactly. None of that visual noise matters for driving. So GPath throws the pixels away entirely. Instead of predicting the exact next pixel, it predicts the next representation of the world state. It focuses purely on physical occupancy, momentum, and spatial relationships.
Well, that makes so much sense.
Right. And because it is suddenly freed from rendering all that useless visual texture, the car can use its compute power to essentially dream in latent space.
Dreaming in latent space. That sounds so abstract. Let's ground that. What does that actually look like inside the car's brain?
Think of latent space as the AI's internal imagination, like a simplified mathematical sketchpad of the physical world. While you are driving, the AI is constantly fast-forwarding time in this sketchpad.
So it's gaming out scenarios.
Yeah, it is simulating millions of what-if scenarios in fractions of a second. What if that pedestrian trips? What if that unicycle swerves left? It tests out all these near-miss collisions internally, figuring out the physics of the outcome before anything actually happens on the real asphalt.
And according to the research, this dreaming process is the silver bullet for one of the oldest problems in autonomous driving: visual occlusion.
Oh, the child behind the car problem.
Exactly. In the old days, if an autonomous vehicle was tracking a car and that car drove behind a large truck, the AV would suffer what engineers call a macrohesitation. It would lose line of sight, essentially forget the car existed, and then slam on the brakes in surprise when the car emerged from the other side of the truck.
Which is terrifying as a passenger.
Yeah.
But that happened because earlier neural networks lacked a basic human cognitive trait: object permanence. If a ball rolls behind a couch, you know it's still there.
Right.
The old AVs didn't. But System 2 reasoning fixes this using something called temporal transformers.
How do those work?
A temporal transformer allows the car to maintain a continuous 10-second buffer in its memory. It holds the past, present, and predicted future in a single four-dimensional memory state.
Okay.
So when that car disappears behind the truck, the AV doesn't just remember it was there. It calculates its mass, its velocity, and its momentum, and accurately predicts exactly where and when its front bumper will reappear from behind the truck.
But wait, we are talking about allowing a car to continuously dream in a mathematical sketchpad, simulating universal physics, holding 10-second 4D memory buffers in real time, all while trying to navigate a swarm of unstructured wheel-legged droids.
God.
Doing that locally, inside a moving vehicle, sounds incredibly, overwhelmingly compute-heavy.
It is staggering. You're hitting on the exact reason why this transition to System 2 deliberative reasoning is forcing a massive bifurcation in the industry, starting right down at the silicon level.
Through a silicon shift, we see this crystallized in Tesla's transition to full self-driving versions 13 and 14 in early 2026. By moving to this physics-aware world model, version 13 achieved a 95% reduction in disengagements. The car had to hand control back to the human 95% less often.
That kind of leap is monumental. And a core mechanism driving that improvement is the shift to Occupational Networks 3.0, which utilized something called 8x high-resolution voxelization.
Okay, let's make sure we define that clearly. A voxel is basically a 3D pixel. It's a block of volume in space.
Right.
In the past, if an old AI saw a shredded piece of semi-truck tire in the middle of the highway, it would try to match the shape of that object to a labeled 2D image of a tire in its database. If the shred was totally mangled and didn't match the label, the car wouldn't know what to do.
Because it only understood labels, not matter. High-resolution voxelization changes that entirely. The AI simply maps the physical volume of the space in front of it.
So it doesn't care about the label.
It doesn't need to know what the debris is at all. It doesn't need to label it a tire shred. It just understands that solid physical matter is occupying a specific grid of voxels in its path, and it routes a path around that matter.
But achieving that high-resolution 3D mapping introduces the compute barrier. You need serious hardware to process that much volume. That's why the new FSD version 14 is actually bifurcated.
Yes, this is a big deal for consumers.
If you own an older vehicle running hardware 3 chips, you're out of luck. You only get version 14 Lite. To run the true, full System 2 world model, you need the new AI4 hardware. You need the 5-megapixel cameras, and you need 5 times the perception bandwidth just to feed the processor.
And keep in mind, we are only talking about the hardware inside the vehicle there. The infrastructure required to train these massive models in the cloud has reached what is now known as the gigawatt scale. To build physical intuition, you need immense test time scaling.
Meaning, the longer you let the AI think about a complex problem during training, the better its physical intuition becomes.
Exactly. But thinking requires electricity. Elon Musk's xAI brought their Colossus 2 cluster online, and it pulls 1.5 gigawatts of power. The compute demands aren't just growing, they are scaling exponentially.
And speaking of handling all that massive, complex System 2 engineering, if you're trying to keep up with these shifts, our sponsor Jamgamind turns this complex System 2 engineering into 60-second audio intelligence for the sovereign enterprise.
It is genuinely a lifesaver for making sense of this stuff quickly.
Absolutely, because it really is like trying to run a massive, modern, open-world video game on a 10-year-old flip phone processor. You just can't cram that much simulated physics into old silicon. But here is the critical pivot in our sources today. Pouring gigawatts of electricity into massive server farms is only half the battle.
Oh, for sure.
These world models are starving for data. They need millions of edge cases to build that physical intuition. But right now, the geopolitical map is actively tearing that global data set apart.
This is where pure engineering crashes headfirst into international policy. The globe is fracturing into completely separate autonomy silos. The sources show we are watching the United States and China establish two distinct, incompatible intelligence environments.
The core philosophies are already totally different. The Western approach, which was heavily discussed on the Twist Deep Dive, is very safety first. Companies like Waymo and Zoox rely heavily on expensive LiDAR sensors. They strictly geofence their vehicles to specific, well-mapped cities, and they depend on incredibly detailed, high-definition maps to know where they are.
Contrast that immediately with the Eastern approach, driven by companies like Xiaomi and Baidu. They operate on a scale-first mentality. Their systems are highly vision-centric, relying on cameras over LiDAR.
And they don't really use maps, right?
Exactly. They are often mapeless, figuring out the roads dynamically, and crucially, they are deeply integrated into broader technological ecosystems. Xiaomi, for instance, is testing humanoid robots on their EV assembly lines, and they're using the exact same underlying AI models for the robots as they use for the cars. They are transferring physical lessons from a factory floor directly to a sedan on the highway.
But the real wedge driving these two worlds apart is the data sovereignty crisis. In 2025, the U.S. Bureau of Industry and Security finalized rules effectively banning Chinese and Russian software in connected vehicles and automated driving systems. And on the flip side, China enforces strict data localization. Any data collected by a foreign EV operating on Chinese soil must remain physically stored and processed within Chinese borders.
Right, and the technical consequence of these policies is profound. Because these massive, rich data sets cannot be legally shared or cross-pollinated across borders, an AI model trained to perfection on the steep hills and social hackers of San Francisco is legally and technically blind to the unstructured swarms of micromobility devices in Beijing traffic.
Which introduces a massive contradiction. If the ultimate goal of these billion-dollar AI labs is to build a general world model that understands universal fundamental physics, doesn't geofencing the training data essentially give the AI a localized lobotomy?
It's a great question.
Like, if you want universal physical intuition, how does that work if your electronic brain is legally restricted to learning on only one continent?
It restricts the AI severely. It creates massive blind spots. And when an AI is artificially blinded by localized data and it suddenly encounters a novel active edge case that it hasn't developed an intuition for, the inevitable happens. It makes a mistake.
And in the physical world of two-ton machines traveling at high speeds, a mistake means an accident. Which brings us to the final and perhaps most difficult layer of this entire transition, the new era of legal liability.
Trolley problem 2.0. We have officially moved past the point of asking, did the car crash? Now, the entire legal and insurance system is asking, why did the car decide to do that?
Right.
When we transition from reactive to deliberative autonomy, we are no longer just auditing a machine that blindly followed hard-coded rules. We have to audit a thinking agent.
This is critical. When an autonomous vehicle faces a true no-win scenario, an unavoidable collision where it has to choose between hitting a concrete barrier or swerving into another vehicle, it must use its System 2 reasoning to make a choice. But more importantly, for the company to survive legally, the AI has to generate an auditable causal chain explaining why it made that choice.
This is known as the reasoning trace.
And to do this, the industry is leveraging vision-language action models, like Google's Gemini robotics. But how does that actually work? How does a car take the complex math of its latent space and explain itself to a human lawyer?
The vision language action model acts as a translator between the physics engine and human language. After an incident, the system looks back at the high-dimensional mathematical weights it used to make the decision.
The latent space math.
Yeah. It sees that the left path had a 90% probability of a severe kinetic impact, while the right path had a 40% probability of a minor impact. The model takes those dimensional weights and maps them directly to linguistic tokens.
So it generates a natural language report. It literally outputs a sentence like, I detected a pedestrian on an unavoidable collision path. I maximized braking force and I identified the leftmost lane as the path with the lowest predicted impact energy. Therefore, I initiated a swerve.
Precisely. The AI is producing a logical, step-by-step defense of its actions. The industry uses the ALICE World V benchmark as the gold standard for testing this, evaluating how well these agents can reason through multi-step decisions and explain themselves. And this level of auditability is really the only way the insurance industry can survive this transition.
Which brings up how insurance is reacting to all this. Insurers like Lemonade are already offering up to 50% discounts for drivers using supervised System 2 full self-driving. Statistically speaking, the data proves these physics-aware models are significantly safer than human drivers. I mean, they don't text, they don't drive drunk, they don't get tired.
But there is a massive catch. As the car does more of the deliberative thinking, the liability entirely shifts from the human behind the wheel to the algorithm itself. We are entering the era of agentic liability.
Right, the financial burden of responsibility for these split-second decisions moves directly onto the balance sheets of AV manufacturers. If the AI agent makes the wrong choice, the enterprise pays for it.
Exactly.
So the black box flight recorder of the future doesn't just record your speed and steering angle, it actually speaks English and defends its own thesis in a court of law. The manufacturers are putting their money exactly where their math is.
What is truly fascinating about stepping back and looking at all these sources is seeing the realization across the entire industry. Simply strapping more cameras to a chassis or driving more test miles to collect more visual patterns was never going to be enough to solve the final 0.1% of driving.
And just wasn't scaling.
No, they had to fundamentally redefine what the car is. The vehicles rolling off the line today are no longer just sensor platforms matching patterns. They are thinking agents equipped with physical intuition, navigating not just roads, but complex social and geopolitical landscapes.
It is an incredible leap forward in engineering. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Buried deep in the technical requirements of the AV Edge Cases report is a mention of the 6G V2X concept, vehicle-to-everything communication.
Oh, this is the really wild stuff.
Right. Under this upcoming 6G paradigm, engineers are building a collective intelligence layer. Imagine a near future where this digital nervous system is fully operational. If just one autonomous vehicle somewhere in a city encounters a totally bizarre, unprecedented edge case, like a burst water main suddenly opening a massive sinkhole in the road, and it uses its System 2 reasoning to safely navigate around it.
It doesn't just keep that hard-earned physical intuition to itself.
Exactly. It instantly uploads a latent update to the network's edge node. That node then pushes the update down to every other car in the vicinity, instantly vaccinating the entire fleet against that specific physical anomaly.
It's a literal hive mind.
Think about what happens when millions of cars share a perfectly synchronized hive mind understanding of universal physics, constantly learning from each other in real time. Eventually, the most unpredictable, messy, and dangerous edge cases on the road won't be construction zones. And they won't be teenagers pulling pranks on 40-mile-per-hour unicycles.
No.
They will be us, the remaining human drivers.
A sobering thought for anyone still holding on to their steering wheel.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
That concludes our special report on the transition to physically grounded AI. The signal for today is physics trumps pattern matching. Success in 2026 isn't about miles driven. It's about the robustness of the world model. This episode was made possible by JamgaMind. Until tomorrow, keep unraveling the future. And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.